Man, that intro always catches me off guard. I'm like looking away or doing something else, and then boom.
That's what it's there for. Hey, everybody.
Oh, yeah. Hi, hey, hello again. Welcome to another edition of Threat Thursday Live. Thanks for joining us this time. Let's see if we can stick to our 25 minute window this time, Tyler. You think we'll get there?
Yeah, I think this time we'll finally be able to hit it under the threshold.
So, who are we talking about this time? What's on the agenda here?
Today, so we have just gotten done with our updated APT-29 threat that will be released probably today or tomorrow, definitely by the end of this week.
So, with this one, we noticed it's been a while since the initial APT-29 threat was put in the Scythe platform, and thought it was a great candidate for updates. A lot's happened since it was released. They've been very active in the last 4 or 5 years, um, mainly thinking about the Microsoft breach, SolarWinds, supply chain attacks, a bunch of little stuff going on with, say, Ukraine, things like that. So we turned around and we gathered what we could and gave us a cool little update. I think you guys will like it. It's kind of interesting. It's doing some stuff with Exchange we haven't done before. So we'll talk through that. For those of you on this live stream that aren't aware who the IPT-29 is, a Russian state-sponsored threat actor group. They target basically anything that's of interest to the Russian Federation, and major countries would be us. Anything Western facing, so UK, Ukraine, any of those kind of little areas. But pretty much anyone that they have a problem with or that is not them is up for grabs. Industries, they're all over the place too, right? They're looking at think tanks, academia, pharmaceutical, engineering, government, anything in technology or finance. They're kind of all over the place, whatever benefits them at the time.
Yeah, and I know you hit on it, but I think definitely the most recent prevalent example of them of them and their campaigns is that Microsoft hack that came out that they have like Microsoft is up there testifying in front of Congress and everything. It's a very big deal. So definitely a threat group to be concerned with.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. You would think with how high profile this has been as of late, there'd be more data out there about these last several breaches or compromises, but there's really not a ton. There's a bunch of people writing blogs talking about it, but nothing really detailing what happened, the how it happened. They just talk about who got hit.
Yeah, for
So
sure. I
this
mean,
was,
normally we're able to pull maybe like one or two CTI feeds or articles, blog posts, etc., to be able to make a pretty thorough threat with the procedural level command line arguments and things like that. But this, I mean, I think you pulled like 20 some odd different articles to try to piece it all together. I mean, it seems like it's very hush hush for such a prevalent group.
yeah, and I mean it's kind of understandably so, seeing as to who they hit, really big names looking at Microsoft, and then easily a baker's dozen other major organizations through the supply chain compromises.
Mhm.
So I can see why there's not a ton out there, and hopefully here in the near future we might see some more about it. But with all of that in mind, let's kind of get in here and start talking about what they were doing and what we've updated for this threat. We based a lot of what the update has around the exchange portion, especially around the SolarWinds supply chain compromise piece. They were seeing some of this stuff happen in tandem. They were either utilizing the SolarWinds supply chain piece to gain access into an environment, into infrastructure, and then doing further recon and actions against it, or they were using this exchange weakness first, where they were taking advantage of like open OA consoles in the exchange management portal and finding their way in that way through the mail infrastructure, and then continue on gathering data, compromising other users and endpoints, and taking action. So we focused a good bit on the reconnaissance and collection of data through Exchange. And with that, what we had going on here is they're looking through the directory or the virtual catalog of users for reconnaissance. They're using Exchange itself and looking at user permissions and the management role assignments they have, looking for key targets, so VIPs, whales, people with further access as well to the infrastructure. Once they find those and they or manage to compromise those accounts, they start sitting in and just gathering mail and gathering data. And they're doing this stuff through these several PowerShell commandlets, mainly being the new mailbox export request and the get mailbox export request, just to kind of view and see what it's doing. So here they're picking a user and they're basically duplicating their mailbox and writing it out to a PST file for exfiltration. And now they're staging all of these on the host itself, so on that Exchange server in a directory. They put it as a password protected archive, zip it up, and then pull it out of the network. So we tried to replicate that here, doing the same thing, using some conditional statements, looking for that Exchange infrastructure, and then looking for users that you could utilize. We set these as variables, so you can input a user directly if you wanted to test with someone you know their permissions might match up. Or you can kind of do this a little more dynamically and make some changes. That is one of the main benefits of our threats, right? Is being able to come in and change things as needed, as necessary to match what you're doing in your environment. It's not just run this and this is all you can do. But that would be the big parts, and the coolest piece of this is how they were latching onto mailboxes, gathering up mail, exfiltrating it slowly over time. And they were looking at it just in small windows of time period. They would do a capture. Once they have the capture, they would remove the evidence of that export request, come back, do it again, capture for a period of time, close it out, and remove evidence, and just kind of wash, rinse, repeat. And it was just a really interesting way of going about it. And then for the simulation of the exfiltration, they were doing this just over HTTPS requests, so blending in like normal C2 traffic. We're emulating that utilizing the built-in modules, uploader and downloader in Scythe to pull the data back over our C2 communications. And I think that kind of sums it up in 5 minutes or less. What do you think, Tyler? Is there anything specific you want to talk to in here?
Um, hmm. I don't know. I think that was a pretty good summary of it. This is definitely the first time that we've really kind of delved into like Exchange servers specifically. So we have, like Trey said, up here, it goes in and checks if the machine that or the endpoint that this implant is on, if it has Exchange service running on it, and if it is, it'll perform these steps. We also included some of the stuff from the Microsoft breach and some of the other CTI in there. So even outside of just the Exchange server itself, even if you don't have an Exchange server or you're not going to run this on your Exchange server for whatever reason, you can still run it, and it still emulates a bunch of other techniques that they utilize. We also observed that in addition to trying to pull the PSTs and OSTs, which are like your email backups, in addition to trying to pull those from the Exchange server itself, they're also doing it on the local machines or on like a user endpoint machine. So if you have if you created a PST or something like that, they're also trying to archive and exfiltrate it from your local box as well, not just the Exchange server itself. So it's interesting that they're doing that. Not just on the server, but just anywhere that they can get it. Right? There's so much useful information in your emails that they'll try to pull back. They also go in and do what we call a browser collection.ps1, which is a script that we made in-house to basically go in and go to all the default locations of Firefox, Edge, and Chrome and archive and pull back all that information. So all of your bookmarks and histories, stored passwords, which are obviously hashed in some form, but they'll be able to have those to try to crack them or do more with them later. But yeah, we've observed a lot of archival of kind of things that we don't normally see. A lot of the times it's just, who am I, system information, things like that. So they're able to, they're able to understand where they are and what's around them. But in this instance, they really, really want to pull back as much information about you and probably your company, I would assume. I mean, your emails have a ton of stuff about your company, your browser history and bookmarks can be very indicative of like what different technologies you use, what seam you use. I mean, bookmarks are what you go to every day. So there's a lot of information that can be gleaned from just like your common user behaviors that they're very interested in. We also have some of the defense impairments in there, some defense evasion. So trying to go in and disable any antivirus that you might have. It attempts to stop the event log service as well as some other services. It goes in and changes your audit policy, which are these two right here. So these, they were observed just clearing all of them. They were observed disabling some things. It kind of depended on the endpoint and where the intelligence was coming from. So in our threat, we didn't want to emulate just clearing everything because that can kind of be a pain to revert back. So we just chose two. So the detailed tracking and account logon we have in there, so you'll be able to see the detections for those and know if that happens in your network. As well as this one was really interesting. They're they were seen changing the network firewall or the firewall to block egress traffic to known EDRs like CrowdStrike or Defender. So even if they did trigger an alert, or it would trigger that executable to be sandboxed and analyzed or something like that, they've blocked the network connection outbound to those IP addresses to try to hinder any kind of analysis by a third party or by an EDR, which we thought was really interesting. We've
And this
included
is
those.
a good thing here too is we only included a couple IP addresses or network ranges. This by no means won't stop everything, and especially on the Defender side, depending on your region, they all check in different areas. So we just included a couple for common US regions. If you're outside of, say, East Coast or your infrastructure being on this side, those check-ins are going to go to a bunch of other places, and those are easily found within the guides for your particular brand of defensive tooling.
Yeah, for sure. Excuse me. And then the the last thing that would kind of have it do, you already spoke to the exfiltration of some of the files, is that they went in and for lateral movement, instead of just running it on the command line, they have it as a scheduled task, which is hidden inside of the Microsoft Windows software protection platform. So it's a little more obfuscated. It blends in a little bit better. It's harder to see. When we made this threat and I was going into the lab to make sure that everything worked the way that it said it worked, I couldn't find this because I normally just look in that front scheduled task part, and I was like, oh no, it didn't work. And I was like, well, I have to follow the trail all the way down. So it's a lot more obfuscated if you have like your detection set up to not care if something new was created inside of this like Microsoft folder. It would be very difficult to detect.
So I think with these behaviors, and the last thing I want to touch on, because we emulated this in here as well, I skipped over it while I was talking about how they were doing data collection and stuff. They went through and they were doing all of the fun with the mailbox copying of stuff that way. They also put themselves in place in one other point, and that was using the set CS or CAS mailbox PowerShell commandlet, which is basically adding their device IDs as allowed devices with the service so that they can actively do a sync of that user's mailbox. So anytime something else came in, they're also getting that data duplicated to them, and they could see it live on their end without having to continually do stuff from within the victim infrastructure. So I thought that was kind of cool as well.
Yeah, that is super neat. It's almost like in TV shows when they clone your phone and they have like that live view of what's happening on your phone as you get your text messages and stuff. Yeah, it's kind of like
Mhm.
that, but in real life. That is neat.
So that is the threat. There's a ton of the interesting info that's out there. There was a good bit is the basic IOC stuff. There's tons of domains, IPs, things like that that's publicly available as knowledge now. But the um, behaviors themselves weren't. So it's kind of cool to see the difference in what we're seeing here compared to other threats. But let's talk detections. What do you got for them, Tyler?
Yeah, for sure. So in the spirit of trying to actually hit our window this time, moved it ahead a little bit. So for these, just like all of our other ones, we provide detections based off of the emulated actions, the emulated threat. So here we have a couple. The first one is this firewall rule update. So again, checking for that blocked CrowdStrike or Defender. And this is a pretty simple detection. It's really just looking for if you have an image of net sh, which is what you have to utilize to update the advanced firewall, and then looking for command line arguments of firewall or set, right? So a pretty straightforward way to look for any kind of firewall modifications that they might make. Then on to the next one. This one is also fairly straightforward. So we're really just looking for the command line argument of the mailbox export request. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I've been going all day like that. So this one, it's a pretty wide coverage. So we saw in the thread that they do a new TAC mailbox export request, a get TAC mailbox export request, and then eventually when they're done with that, they'll delete it in the end. So this kind of covers the basis for all of those. And this could be, I would imagine that you shouldn't get too many false positives based off this. I wouldn't imagine it would be too frequent that someone would put in a request to export their mailbox. Or if it was like some kind of a maintenance thing or a backup or something, that should be pretty easy to exclude based off of where it's coming from or the parent process or the user that's starting this. So that should be a pretty good one to monitor with minimal false positives. And then that takes us over to the audit policy tampering via the audit poll, which is audit policy. So in here, just kind of tabled out the parent image, and command line arguments. So again, we're looking for the image of audit poll and then some keywords, some command line arguments of disable, clear, and restore, or restore, not and, or restore. So that way, able to see if anybody is trying to disable or modify to provide less visibility in your audit policy. And I don't think I've ever seen the audit poll image utilized ever in any engagement or exercise or threat hunt that I've ever been a part of. I've never seen somebody go in and weaken the audit policy. So this should be a pretty good one to keep track of without really any false positives or anything like that. And then in the archive creation, the adversary always wants to archive and exfiltrate important information. And you don't want to send just one single file out, or excuse me, you want to send just one file out. You don't want to send, a whole directory, constantly over several minutes. During there, we just have if an archive is created at all. We have some other rules for more suspicious archives. But in this one, we're just looking for any archives that are created. So we're relying on the image of those archives. So 7-zip, 7z, asterisk, WinRAR, tar, things like that. And then this querying by the image, I prefer to do vice the command line argument because you can always rename the executable to whatever you want. So like to outside of APT-29, a multi-foon thread that we did, they renamed the rar.exe to romf.exe to try to evade like any kind of command line arguments or command line detections. Your image doesn't work like that. The image is what it is when that image is loaded, so it's much more difficult to obfuscate or change that. That would require you to basically like recompile the executable itself. So not a simple rename, which can be easily bypassed or averted. So I like that one by the image, and the parent image just makes it more clear as to what it's coming to. So again, if you do have a lot of false positives, you should be able to filter out some of the parent images or the parent processes, and that should give you a little more fidelity on what's happening. And then the last detection that we have in here is less of a detection and more of like something to monitor, maybe. So this is the one that I really like. You're basically looking at each image and seeing what that image is querying. So what network connections is it trying to make, essentially? So we're looking at event code 22 for you sysmon people out there. So that is DNS requests. So here we could see that APT-29 underscore TT.exe, which would be great if that's what they actually named it, but probably not. It'll be a little more obfuscated, a little blend in a bit more. We see it's going to this prod.unicroft, which is one of our sites C2 domains, as well as the sysinternals.com, which is where it downloads psexec as part of their ingress tool transfer. And you can also see in the image that it's launching from a desktop. So that's another spot that I like to look at to try to rule out false positives or to try to highlight things, maybe not rule out false positives as much. But like if you see images reaching out to the internet from basically any kind of user profile, basically anything that isn't in program files or system 32 for the most part. That would, I think, spawn some kind of investigation, right? If you have something in the downloads folder or you have something in the temp folder or something like that that's reaching out to the internet, that probably is, you're going to want to investigate that.
I
As
do think,
far as, yeah, sir.
looking at the archive creations there, Tyler, I do think that was one of the few things that was highlighted in a lot of the reporting is where they were staging stuff actually on Exchange.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's really interesting how they're hosting it out because they're renaming them, the archives basically, and putting them as like PNG files
Hmm.
and hiding them within the HTTP, like the proxy folder. So under the actual like front end config files for
Hmm.
how OA is being served up, they would hide it in there under like OA/OA/auth reader.png or something like that.
Oh, that's neat.
And yeah, the other way they were doing it too is they would hide it under the themes hive. So they
Hmm.
would dive it under OA, auth current themes inside resources and put it there because that stuff's all still from the front end publicly reachable.
Yeah,
So that was
that's cool.
kind of interesting.
I guess if you hosted it from up there, you wouldn't even have to have to try to exfiltrate it. You could just go to that site directly and pull it down. You wouldn't have to do that from inside the network. You could do that from whatever exfil attack box that you have and pull it down that way, and it'll probably look a lot more normal than it going from inside out.
Yeah, exactly. It just looks like normal infrastructure and how it works.
That's cool. I like
Cool.
that a lot.
Well, look at that, 22 minutes. I think we were good there with that one. So I
Sweet.
guess last things we'll leave you guys with, if you think these are cool, if you want to learn more about the Scythe platform, the stuff we're doing, and get a chance to use it for a bit, we do monthly workshops. Sadly, this month for June has already gone and passed, but July has another one coming up mid-month. Go check it out at the site you can see down here on the little scrolling banner and register and get a chance to come hang out with us some more and play with the platform. Any parting words you want to give them before we sign out of here, Tyler?
Um, just thanks everybody for coming. Tell your friends. Let us know. Trey and I have our Twitter socials up there if anybody wants to connect or have any ideas or any comments. And yeah, just thanks again for stopping by.
All right, till next time, everybody. Thanks for attending.
See ya. Thanks.